and welcome to another live stream. However, this time it will be a little bit special. So, you may have noticed the VTuber avatars, PNG tuber avatar is not available at the moment. There's a very good reason for that, and it's largely because I didn't want to add an extra asset. Why is that? Well, the truth of the matter is, there's been a property I've been interested in getting into for some time. And, well, that product is Yu-Gi-Oh! I've heard nothing but the Banari praise this game for the longest time, but I've never really gotten into it myself, and I've been curious. Especially with the recent passing of Kazuki Takahashi, I wanted to see what all the hubbub was about, but I have no knowledge of how this game operates. And so, here I am. But since I don't understand how the game operates, I naturally need a hand. So I consulted a bit of an assistance in, well, the Banari. And so that's what will be occurring today. So, go ahead then. Alright, so so basically the way this is gonna work is I will be teaching you the basic mechanics of Yu-Gi-Oh! I won't get too detailed today because that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is just to explain what's going on, and then if I need to at a later point I can go into more advanced detail. Alright. Okay, so here's what will happen. I will be teaching you about the basics, like I said. That also means, however, the chat will not be acknowledged until each lesson is completed. So for those in the chat who are wondering why I'm not, or why this David is not getting to your comment, we're not ignoring you. The purpose of this is I want to teach this version of David the basics, and after each section I will take a look at the chat and respond. We're not ignoring you, it's just for the sake of, oh fuck's sake. Okay, now then, where was I? Oops, that is not what I meant. Okay. Let's try that again. TLDR, we're not ignoring you in the chat. It's the only reason I'm doing this is for the sake of trying to streamline the lesson so that way we don't go on to any unnecessary tangents and other factors. We will, however, be acknowledging and responding to your comments in chat after each lesson, which shouldn't be too long. And if you have any questions about the game, we will also address it, or I will address it in this case. Alright, so without any further delay, are you ready? Yes, I'd say so. Alright, so I'm going to get the music ready. Let me double check if that's... Okay, I think that should be decent enough. The way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Operates is an interesting one. If you've played a similar game like Pokemon or even Magic the Gathering's trading card game, this will be a little bit easier to understand. But in order to construct cards and understand the core mechanics, we need to first understand what is going into a card deck. So, there are three types that I want to begin with. Let me pull up the screen share here. This is just for a beginner deck. The deck size is a lot bigger than this, but we will get into that after the first lesson. So, let us begin with the first type
that you want to fill your deck with. Monster cards. These are your primary way of defending yourself from attacks and also attacking your opponents. These will often make up a majority of your deck, so it's only right I cover these first. We will begin with the white/yellow monsters. The way these operate is, you can summon them from your hand, sometimes the graveyard, but that's a complicated mess we don't need to get into at the moment. These are the monsters that you will be using to either attack your opponent or defend yourself from their attacks, because they can attack during their turn. These have no special effects or anything special about them. The purpose of them is to get them out on the field to either protect yourself or attack. Or it sounds a bit redundant, but alright. Look, there's a reason for this. Alright. Like I said, these are meant to basically be your beat sticks, your shields, what have you. There is, however, a bit of an extra factor. One way to associate these, or disassociate these, from other cards is these ones have a value known as attack and defense. Something you will not see with many other cards here is, if those cards do not have these are not considered monster cards. There are some exceptions, but that is dependent on the card text. You don't need to worry about that for this lesson. That will be determined later on. For now though, what matters is, if you have these in your hand, you can use these. You don't need to worry about any effects. You don't need to worry about anything else. You can just bring them down to the field and go nuts, basically. Well, sort of. So, there is another factor. Now that we've addressed what the attack and defense values are, you may have noticed the stars up here. What these mean is very important for summoning. If your card has 1 star or 4 stars, you don't need to worry about tributing, which I think you may be familiar with, other David, if you've played the trading card game of Pokemon, and like, yes, I do recall this, tributes and sacrifices, whatever. Yes. So 1 to 4 basically means you can summon this straight out of your hand. No big deal, you're good to go. There is a minor note, which is that light/spellcaster. This is your type as well as spellcaster, but these are elements you don't need to worry about for the most part unless you're running specific types of deck, which for the sake of this lesson you don't need to worry about. Alright, fair enough. So I summon as many of these out in the field and I win, right? No. Here's what happens. During your turn, you are only allowed to normal summon, and there's a reason for this. You are allowed to normal summon once. So if, for instance, this Neo card, if you have this in your hand, you can summon this card to your field, and only this card. And then you have to wait till your next turn to be able to normal summon again. There are, however, other conditions that allow you to summon multiple times, but not with these. What that is referring to is known as special summoning. In special summoning, you are allowed to summon multiple cards on one turn. However, but those cards are often associated with the card effect. Say, for instance, right here, Monster Reborn. This will allow you to target a monster in either person's graveyard, which is the place a monster goes after they've been destroyed by battle, and you can special summon it. You can if it says special summon, you can do this multiple times, but with different cards. So, for instance, if I had 3 of these Monster Reborns, and I activated them all in the same turn, I can special summon 3 monsters, as long as I have monsters in either grave. There isn't really a limit to how many special summons you can do. Just as long as you have the card that allows you to special summon, you're good to go. It's normal summons, however, that you can only do once, and that's it for your turn. So, you know now how to summon. Well, sort of. Here's the thing. There are 2 ways to bring a monster out onto the field. You can either have the card facing towards your opponent face up. That is known as attack position. Attack position, attack mode, face up, what have you. There is, however, another way of summoning. That way is known as defense mode summoning, or just summoning in defense mode. The way this operates is you lay the card face down on your side of the field and face towards the left, your left. What that means is your attack slash card cannot attack, but if you're being attacked by an opponent, you can effectively block the attack depending on how much defense value you have. When you're in face-up attack mode, the value of which damage you can do is determined by the attack value of the card, which is to the left. When you're on defense, the value is instead determined by your defense value, which is to the right of it. It may sound like a lot, but it becomes easier to understand as you go through the paces. Now, if your opponent has a monster on their side of the field that has a lower attack value when you attack them, their card is destroyed, and if it's in attack position, they lose life points, which we'll get to in a minute. If they're higher than yours, and depending on the position, oftentimes though, since your card is in attack position and you attack them, your card is destroyed and you take damage. Otherwise, if you are attacking, but that also depends. Sometimes in a defense position, if you attack a defense position monster, I should say, then all you do is lose damage and your card is face up. It depends on the format and it depends on some versions. It's a bit complicated, but the point is, the factor still remains, even if the card isn't destroyed, if you attack a monster with higher attack or defense, you take damage. It just depends on the format you play that results in the card being destroyed or not. Alright, fair enough. So, is this the only type of monster I can summon? No. Now, these two operate on a similar wavelength, which is that you can just summon these right from the hand, but as you notice here with the Mystical Elf, this one highly prioritizes defense points. So this one is more likely one you would set in face down defense position. Alright. So, I mentioned two forms of summoning, but there is another way. If you set your monster in face down defense position, and then you go to your next turn, so after your opponent does their stuff and goes back to you, what you can then do on your next turn is that you can effectively flip your card if you wish to do it. I don't recommend it with this card, but you get the idea. It's an example. You can flip your card to attack position, which is face up towards the player, and that is known as a flip summon. In addition, during the turn after you summon your monster, you can change its battle position. You can only do this the turn after your creature is summoned, and or in other words, when it's your next turn. You cannot change the battle position after summoning the monster. You can only do, or at least the turn you summon it. You can do it the turn after, but not before. So I've covered normal summon, flip summon, and special summon. But there is one other. Notice how I brought up 1 to 4 stars. Well, there are more than just 4 stars in this game. At the very least, the maximum is 12. So, let me put it this way. Say you have a 5 to 6 star monster. Fortunately for this example, we have just that, the Dark Magician Girl. So the purpose of this card is, and we'll get to this actually serves as a decent segue into effect monsters, the second version of monster cards. But we can get into that in a minute. The purpose of this next lesson is about the next star set, which is 5 to 6. The difference between these cards and the 4-star cards is that in order to summon these, unless it explicitly states another factor, you need to tribute summon in order to get it out. So, to bring out Dark Magician Girl, if I had Neo the Magic Swordsman out on the field, I would have to wait till my next turn, which means much like changing your battle position, you have to wait at least one turn on your end. So it's the turn after your summon to do a tribute summon. So I would sacrifice this card, which means tribute summon, which means I send this card to the graveyard so I can bring out the Dark Magician Girl. Fortunate, and much like normal summoning, you can only do a tribute summon once per turn. Special summoning still applies as normal. You can do that as many times as you can, as long as you have the cards for it. But for tributes, once per turn. And if you happen to normal summon, you can't tribute summon. But vice versa. If you tribute summon, you can't normal summon. So you have to make that move accordingly. Do you take the risk and sacrifice your big monster, or do you summon another one? Alright. What's that called next to it, though? We will get to that in a moment. So, do you understand what I'm saying with the 5 to 6 stars? Yes. 5 to 6, though. So, what about 7 to 8? We'll get to that. Alright, so the purpose of this is, in order to summon, say, this card, I have to sacrifice my monster on the field first. Correct. Is there a way to summon other ones? Yes. Actually, let's get into that. So, 5 to 6 requires 1 tribute summon, but 7 to 8 requires 2, unless explicitly stated on the card, but those are a rarity. 7 to 8 requires 2 sacrifices. Meaning, if you had 2 Neo Magic Swordsmen, you would have to summon those, which would take 2 turns, or if you special summoned one, less time. And then, once that's out, you can sacrifice them or tribute them to the grave to bring out this card. But this is a normal monster, so that is dependent. For this early in the game, these are fine. As the game evolved, though, we started to see more of these orange cards. But I guess speaking of rarity, there are 9-star and above monsters, some of which have varying conditions, but others don't. With those cards, however, unless explicitly stated in the card, which is pretty easy to read for most of them at least, you need to sacrifice 3 cards. So that takes you 3 turns, or if you have the materials to special summon, less time than that. So the general rule of thumb, 1 to 4, you can summon right away. 5 to 6, 1 sacrifice. 7 to 8, 2 sacrifices. 9 to 12, 3. Alright, so that takes care of the normal summons, as well as normal monster cards. I'm going to take a look at the chat and see if there's anything going on. Once again, to those in the chat, if you have any questions regarding the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, I can answer that, no problem. Okay, looks like the chat's doing alright. Let's move in, let's head back to the Dark Magician Girl then. You may have noticed the color is different than the others. There's a reason for this. An orange/brownish card is known as an effect monster. These are effectively similar to the regular monsters you have, but these have added effects, some of which are dependent on flip summoning, which we already discussed, but others don't. This one is the latter. This one relies on having a card known as the Dark Magician or the Magician of Black Chaos, which I don't have in this starter deck, but that's fine. It's not necessary. At least right now. And it gains attack points. Alright. So for this one, if you have an orange/brownish card, these ones are effect monsters. The ones that are yellow are normal monsters. You're more likely to run into effect monsters nowadays, but yeah. Either way, these have varying effects, some of which depend on flip summoning, others can potentially activate if you attack them in battle, because they have to flip up towards the player, or basically be removed from their face down position and face towards the left but face up. But that depends on the format. Some games treat it as a flip summon if you do that, others don't. It's a complicated mess that I don't want to get into because it's a whole other can of worms. The point is, these ones are effectively similar to normal monsters, but they have special effects to them. Some can help you, but some can help your opponent, depending on what they run, and others don't really do too much, but that's not important. Okay, so you get what I'm saying? Yes, I would say so. Effect monsters are basically yellow, brownish / orangish creatures, and they have effects that require me to read the card just to be on the safe side. Yes, fortunately though, with a lot of these, they're not too long, so yeah. And a lot of the ones that are just the outliers. Alright. So, alright, okay. I think I understand. Okay. Now, this is just one example of an effect monster. This is another one. This is a flip summon, known as the Stern Mystic. As I mentioned earlier with flip summoning, the way you can activate this effect is, depending on the format, having this in face down defense position and having an opponent attack it, which basically flips it over, but that may not work for every format, and some don't treat it as a flip summon. The other way to get this effect to activate is you set it face down like normal, face down defense position, then you wait a turn for your opponent to finish, and then when it's back to you, you flip summon, which again, you flip the card over and face towards your opponent. Then its effect activates. In this case, all face down cards in the field are just turn face up, and this one has an added effect of not activating other card effects when this occurs. Oh wow, okay, that's pretty good. Alright. Okay, so I think that covers a majority of the monster cards, save for a couple others that were a thing during this section of the game, but those aren't really relevant right now. We can get to those after. Alright. Okay. Next, I want to deal with the greenish cards here. These are another essential part of your deck. These can either be a majority or a minority of your hand / deck, but that's besides the point. So, okay, screw it, this works fine. This is known as a spell card. Sometimes magic, sometimes spell, not important. The way these operate is, you can activate them straight from your hand or from the field. Okay, alright. These, much like effect monsters, can either benefit a monster, benefit you, the player, or sometimes benefit the opponent, but that's a rarity. Like I mentioned, hydrating, some cards like Monster Reborn, for instance, allow you to special summon a monster. Other cards, like Darkhole, destroys every monster on the field and sends them to the graveyard. But these aren't the only type of spell cards out there. You need to take a look at specific symbols, which is located next to the spell card, like this one, Book of Secret Arts. There are multiple symbols in this game, but a lot of them are really easy to follow. For this example, the one that has a plus sign on it is known as an equip card, which may go without saying, but just to be safe, the way this operates is you can summon a monster, but you can also have this card, whether from the hand or the field, and equip it, which means activating the card, selecting your monster, and then that monster gets an increase to their attack stat. However, if this card is but it's not just permanently on the field. It will remain on the field until the monster is destroyed, tributed, or the card Book of Secret Arts, for instance, is destroyed. Now, if the equips card is destroyed, the monster isn't destroyed unless explicitly stated in the text, but that is very rare to occur, so you don't need to worry about that. Alright. So this is the equip spell. Next, let's go with continuous. This is associated with an infinity symbol. The way this operates is that, unlike, say, Monster Reborn or Darkhole as examples, continuous spells will stay on the field after their activation, and their effects will permeate / continue on, hence the name continuous. For instance, this card, Messenger of Peace, means that neither player can declare attacks that have 1500 or more attacks, but you have to pay 100 or more life points each of your standby phases, which we'll get to in a bit. The purpose, though, or the TLDR of this is, with these cards, they can stay on the field as long as they want, but they can also be destroyed by either other spell cards, other monster effects, or what have you. Or in this case, not paying the 100 life points. Alright. Is this starting to get a bit complicated? A little bit, but I think I can manage it. Alright. The TLDR of this is, these are similar to the other spell cards I went over, but this one just stays on the field. This is associated with the infinity symbol. Now, say I activated this card, but my opponent, or say the opposite occurred and my opponent activated this, I have a way to counter this. This is more so associated with the next type of cards, but there are magic cards that have this, and these are often associated with lightning bolts or another type, but we can get into that later. These are known as quick play spells. You can activate these right away, but that's effectively similar to a lot of these magic cards anyways, so it's not really a notable trait for these, but it's often associated with the next card type. We'll get to that though. All quick play means is effectively you can just play this quickly or immediately, what have you. Alright. So for this case, if someone sets Messenger of Peace and doesn't activate it, although you could activate this regardless, I could activate Twin Twister from my hand, or if it's on the field already, I can just activate it there, and I just discard one card and then just destroy 2 spell or trap cards, which we'll get into in a bit. And then they're gone. It's basically just, hey, do you want to activate this right away? There you go. The next card type is what I refer to as... Well, actually, hang on. There is another type, I just remembered. The counter cards. These are often associated with an arrow facing towards the left. The purpose of these cards is you can activate them in response as well to whatever your opponent activates, or sometimes, depending on what you're running, whatever you activate. For this card, if I were to activate Twin Twister or Messenger of Peace, my opponent could theoretically activate the card Magic Jammer and counter my attack / counter my effect. What this means is, once they do the requirements of negating, I cannot activate my effect and my card is destroyed. Oh wow, really? Yep. Sheesh, alright. Now, there is one other type of card out there. These are known as, that is another thing. These cards, the ones that look like a diamond, these are known as field spell cards. The purpose of these is to either give you extra bonuses, such as increased attack, or extra effects, such as decreasing certain monsters, which may benefit your opponent or hurt your opponent, or could give it extra effects like you can only be destroyed, such as maybe some monster could only be destroyed by specific effects, or maybe they're protected by it with this card. Now, previously, what would occur is if your opponent or you played another spell card after one was already on the field, the original spell card would be gone. It would be sent to the grave. It's out of sight, out of mind. Nowadays, though, the problem has been remedied, and a player can activate these field cards on their sides of the field. It just means that the effect, it basically overlays. Meaning you can basically have 2 spell cards in the game, but 1 per opponent / contestant. Now, there is one last thing, which is the ritual summons. The way these operate is, well, actually, oh wait, no, this one works. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to make sure. These are often associated with a flame symbol, and the way ritual cards work is you have to send cards from your hand or field whose star cards, or levels in the card's description, equal insert number here. For this card, Hymn of Blessing, I would need a 6-star monster. So I could theoretically just send Dark Magician Girl to the grave and summon the monster Sapphire, Queen of Dragons, which is what the card is used for. So, here's the thing though. For ritual summons to be pulled off, you need the magic or spell card and the creature itself in your hand. Otherwise, it will not activate, and you need to wait. And that's important. You need these cards. You need the magic card to summon it, and you need the ritual card itself. We'll get to that in a moment. Actually, no. Let's get to that now because it's also a monster. So, this is Sapphira, Queen of Dragons. These are ritual cards, and ritual cards are often associated with a bluish card to them. But there's another card which may confuse you if you were to play modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there's another type out there called not Union. Basically, there's a blue card section out there with a whole bunch of stupid arrows on it. That's a much later addition to the game. You don't need to worry about that for now. Alright. Okay. So these are ritual cards, and much like tribute summoning, you can bring these out if you have the materials for it. But again, you need this card and the ritual card in order to pull it off. If you only have one of these, you cannot ritual summon. You need both in your hand. Oh, alright. Okay. So, let's move on to trap cards then. So, these are often associated with a purple one. These ones see less use nowadays, but you may end up using it anyways, especially for effects like these. Okay. So, these ones work similarly to magic, but also differently. Unless you have a quick play trap card in your hand, you cannot activate these right away. The way that trap cards activate is you have to set the card face down and then end your turn, or wait until you're done your turn before you can activate it. In other words, say I played Magic Jammer, and by that I mean set it down on the field. Then I end my turn and my opponent goes next and activates a spell card. I can activate Magic Jammer. If, however, the opponent activates the spell card again, and I did not set this previously, I cannot activate Magic Jammer to negate the effect. Oh wow. I take it these cards aren't really used nowadays. You'd be correct. Trap cards require a little bit more setup in order to operate. Need to hydrate 1 second. Alright. So part of the reason why is largely since you have to do a lot more setup. Not many people use these cards, as well as other stuff like more reliance on effect monsters and magic cards. Whole other thing. Okay. So, much like magic cards though, trap cards have pretty much every symbol except for maybe ritual and field spells. But even then, that's debatable. Some trap card, I guess, also equip, but some trap cards also allow you to equip. It's just more nefarious effects. The long and short of it is, these operate on similar logic as magic cards or spell cards, but you have to set them down first, unless it's a quick play. And that's about it. Alright. Okay. Now, let's show you the final method of summoning before we get into the gameplay itself. Fusion summoning. So, in order for this to work, what you need to do is similar to the act of ritual summoning. Where's the card? Oh my, okay, there it is. So the way this works is you need a card like polymerization, but there are several cards out there that are similar to this. And the way it operates is you have to send cards from either your hand or your field to the graveyard, similar to ritual summon, but you can't simply just have specific stars on them to do it. You need to have the exact material to do it. Otherwise, you cannot do it. Much in some versions, however, particularly the earlier versions, you would need the fusion card in your hand to do it. But nowadays, this is alleviated with something known as the extra deck. What the f... Okay, sorry about that, folks. Nowadays, though, this is alleviated by having the fusion cards in your extra deck. Alright, sounds simple. Okay. So, let me use an example here. We're gonna go with the basic one. So, for this example, and I'll show you what it is in a moment. What? Oh, right, I forgot to do the dash here. There we go. So, this is a card known... Right, extra deck. This is a card known as the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. As you see in the card description, it doesn't have any effects, but it lists 3 cards known as the Blue Eyes White Dragon. So, how do we bring this sucker out? There's a few ways, but normally, you would have to have these 3 on either your side of the field or in your hand. Then, you also have to have polymerization either set or in your hand, and then activate the card. You then send these 3 to the grave, and you can summon Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. And again, fusion cards are often associated with this purple background. But the more important thing is, unlike ritual monsters, you need to have the materials in your hand. You can't just simply sacrifice 2 of the Dark Magician girls to bring out this card. You need the exact materials. Fortunately, this card exists, particularly in the text, that says, hey, you need these 3, otherwise you can't summon it. Well, sort of. There are some cards that you can get away with. What was the name? There are cards like these, which serve as fusion substitution. Basically, you can substitute this card for a fusion material monster, but these come at a cost that the other fusion materials have to be the exact one. Or, if the card says it's treated as this card when in the graveyard or on the field, that works too. So for instance, although I don't think it works as the best example here, theoretically speaking, if I only had 2 of these in my hand, but I had a goddess with the third eye, theoretically I could use polymerization to bring out the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. But since the fusion material are all 3 white dragons, it may not work exactly. But that's okay, there's several hundreds of fusions out there which this does work for. What's important is make sure you have the right materials to summon it, and you're good to go. Alright. Okay. So, that is basically everything for constructing a deck. Now that you know the materials that go into making it, now things get a little bit more complicated. Let me just do a save here, just to be safe. So, this is a much more refined deck. And nowadays, these are often cards you will see. Your effect monsters, your well, stuff like that. As well as these black cards, but we don't need to worry about that for now. We're just starting off with the basics. Alright. So, in order for you to even get in a duel, you need to have a maximum of 40 cards. But 40 is also the minimum. You cannot have more than 40, and you cannot have less than 40. If you try to compete with with less than 40 or more than 40, you will not be allowed to compete. Oh, wow. Alright. Okay. So, basically that. Now, again, it's not the end of the world if you have a whole bunch of monsters comprising it or magic, but you gotta find a balance for the cards. Okay? Yes. Alright. Now, you may have noticed these symbols. The ones and the crosses, or the negates. The way this operates is that in a lot of the TCG, the trading card game, and the OCG original card game format, the way this operates is that they have a forbidden list and a limited list. A limited list means you can only have sometimes 1, sometimes 2 versions of the card in your deck. If it is in a forbidden list, however, you are not allowed to have this card if you're playing in a TCG or OCG format. You are not allowed to have these, they are banned, and you cannot use them. Now, if you're not playing in a format that requires or uses these ban lists, then you're fine. You can have up to 3 of these of any card, and there you go. Oh, alright, so it is kind of similar to Magic in a sense. Yes. Alright. So, how does the game itself operate? Glad you asked. So, I'm going to do a practice duel here. I'm going to remove the ban list. And, the hell? It's weird. Okay, so I'm going to duel... Actually, let's duel the beginner deck, just because it's more likely that... Yeah. I mean, fair enough. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the music here. And we'll just begin. So, when we get into a duel, there are multiple ways to determine who goes first in a duel. You can flip a coin, you can rock, paper, scissors, what have you. For this version that we'll be using, I'm using rock, paper, scissors. So, I won the rock, paper, scissors, which means I get the decision of going first or second. Some strategy rely on you going second so that you get a chance to attack your opponent, because the person who goes first cannot. But some want to do setups so they can go first. I will go first, just for the sake of this. Okay, so if I were to pick first, I would need 5 cards in my hand. The maximum / card limit for the amount of cards in your hand is 6. If you have above 6, you need to discard the card at the end of your turn until you reach 6 again. Alright. What happens if the deck reaches 0 per se? If the deck reaches 0, and then then after you end your turn, and after your opponent does, then it's your turn and the game ends. Because with each turn, you have to draw a card. For this first turn, though, if you went first, you do not draw a card. You just have your 5, and you're good to go. Now, let's address these phases. So, there are 6 phases to this. There is your draw phase, which is not applicable for this first turn. There's your standby phase, your main phase, there are 2 of these, which is basically just getting your stuff set up, like your summons, your stuff like that. Your battle phase, which allows you to attack, your second main phase, which is basically more setup, and then you end your turn. So for this first one, I will set these face down, and I will, since I have this card, I will set it face down. That is all I can do, so I will end my phase. Now we'll get to what our opponent does. Okay, so this person activated Twin Twister. Do you remember the quick play? That means I can activate this and negate its effect, which means my card still gets destroyed, but he can't activate it. Okay, so like I said, after the first turn, after you end your turn, if you went first, or effectively, after the very first turn of the game, the next person's turn begins with them drawing a card. Standby phase is whatever. We're back to main phase 1. However, running out of cards here is not the only way to lose. Let's get into the numbers game. These are the life points that I mentioned earlier. Each duelist, unless in specific formats, starts with 8,000. So, how do we deal with these? Well, for this card, for instance, I can't really do much against it. Well, not yet at least. Do you notice the Heavy Storm card? I can activate this and deactivate it, and now the card is gone. Unfortunately, I don't have anything to attack this with, so I have to end my turn. Now my opponent draws again, and they do their stuff. Oh no. So, wait a minute, wait. How did you not lose life points for that? Basically, I had my card, in this case Arcana Force 7, face down in defense mode. Because it's in defense, I take no damage, unless the card explicitly states that you take damage because the monster attacking it can effectively do piercing damage, which is basically whatever the total attack is minus the defense points are subtracted from your life points. So for instance, if Dark Magician Girl had piercing damage, that would be 2,000 minus 1,700, which means I would take 300 points of damage. Oh, okay. Now, I do not have a card that I can summon right now, which is also the unfortunate thing about this game, which is that sometimes you just have a bad hand. But now I can show you what happens with a direct attack. So I will end my phase and move on. Oh, they called out Yamu. Oh, geez. So what that means is, now I took 2,200 points of damage because there was nothing I could have on my field that defended it. Oh, right, forgot to mention. These 5 up here, these are the monster card zones. The ones back here are the spell and trap card zones. You don't need to worry about these are much later. This is the graveyard. These are where the monsters go after they've been destroyed in battle or destroyed by effects, what have you. This is the banished pile. It will, oftentimes though, it will state that, most part you don't need to worry about this unless the cards, or another card specifically states, hey, if this is destroyed, this goes here. Alright. The main ones you need to focus on is, this is your field card zone, this is your monster card zone, this is your field spell and trap card zone, and this is your grave. Now, I have a card here that allows me to draw 2 additional cards. Normally, I only draw 1 per turn after the first turn is done. But a card like this means that I can draw 1 card during my draw phase, and with this card, draw an extra 2 cards. So I will do just that, and send this card to the grave. And now I can draw 2 more cards. So I will activate this card, which means, as you can see, continuous spell. What this means is that now I can summon, via special summoning, a fairy type monster from my hand. So I'll do just that. I will choose this card. Now, normally, I would need to sacrifice 2 monsters. However, special summoning in this case means if I have a fairy type monster in my hand, I can summon it from here as long as I have nothing in my monster card zone. So I will bring this card out, and I can choose either attack position or defense position. That's another thing that separates it from normal summoning. Alright. Wait a minute, why did it lose life points? Attack points, but to answer your question, what happened is, I summoned it when Yami was out on the field. What Yami does is it increases the attack and defense of all fiend and spell type monsters, but for fairy types, those are decreased by 200 points. Now, normally, if I normal summon this, I could not summon Arcana Force 4, but since I special summoned it, it means that I can. So I can summon that. Okay, so let me explain what happened there. Athena has an ability that means every time I summon a fairy type, my opponent takes 600 points of damage immediately. What that also means is that that is another way that they can take damage. You don't need to attack them for that. They can, if you have a card effect that does that, then they take damage from that. Okay. So for instance, I could also activate Athena's other effect, which means I can send 1 face-up fairy type, which means either Athena or Arcana Force. But usually Arcana Force would be applicable, otherwise this creates a whole other mess. And then I can special summon it. Oh, wait, nope, here we go. This is why it's important to read your card text. Ah, I see what you mean. Basically, you can't select Athena. Correct. I have to choose Arcana Force. And then I can special summon a fairy type monster. Do I have that in my graveyard? That's where it's important to check. And yes, I do. Fairy type. Both of these. For the sake of this, however, since I don't really have an Arcana Force monster, I will activate Athena's effect. Now I can send this card to the graveyard, send it to the grave, and then I can summon Dark Lord Superbia. Attack mode. And Athena's effect kicks in again. Now this one is asking me if I wish to activate Dark Lord's effect. But what is Dark Lord's effect? Well, according to the card, I can target 1 fairy type monster in your grave and special summon it. So I will do just that. And bring back Arcana Force. This is what I meant by, with special summoning, you are not limited in the amount of summons. It just, the only thing that you need to worry about is, do you have enough cards to do multiple special summons in 1 turn? In my case, yes. But let's just get this taken care of. And since I special summoned again, I can activate its effect again. Because it just only means if it's summoned. It's not normal summoned. It means I can either get this from normal summoning or special summoning. Alright, without any further delay, I will enter my battle phase and attack this creature. Since that was in face-up attack position, they lose 500 life points because 2700 minus 2000 is 700 points of damage. Now, much like what they did to me, I can attack them directly with Athena as well as Arcana Force, so I'll do just that. And there you go. Next, I'll end my phase. Okay, so what I'll do here is I will reactivate Trade-In. Send that card to the grave because it's not important. Now, Call of the Haunted is, like I said earlier with the trap card section, I cannot activate this card right away. I have to set it face down first, and then wait till my opponent goes before I can activate it. But I do have another card that I can set in face down defense position or directly. But for now, I will set this card face down and attack. Okay, so he had nothing that could defend themselves. And that basically takes care of the tutorial section. At least for the original series. 5Ds introduced another type of summoning, but I don't think that would be important for now, unless you're curious or the chat is curious. But for now, I'm going to take a quick break / hydrate, and if you have any questions, either David or the chat, feel free to ask them in the chat. So I'll give you guys some times to set up / ask your questions, and yeah. Okay, so I just finished getting hydrated. Doesn't appear to be any questions in the chat, so alright, that's okay. What did you think of the lesson, other David, as well as the chat? What did you think of the lesson? I think you did an alright job. I think I understood some sections of it. Alright, yeah, that's no problem. Again, you'll figure out how to do this in due time. And if you need to, I can teach you about the later mechanics that were introduced in, say, 5Ds and the like. Alright. So one last call, chat. If you have any questions about what I just taught you, feel free to ask. In the meantime, I'm gonna look for someone to raid. So I'm gonna give that a couple minutes before we raid, and yeah. Alright, thank you again, Benari, for the assistance. I'll be sure to draw your himbo, David, in due time. That was not even close to the reward I asked you, but whatever, fine. Also, I think that already exists if we count the Pokemon version, but that's besides the point. Anyways. Whatever, you'll be dealing with this person another time. They just needed my help, so there we are. So, since I did, that means I'm probably going back to the Shadow Realm or something. I don't know. I can worry about that on my own time, so... yeah. This person will be back to, do your regularly scheduled streaming, hopefully tomorrow, but we'll see. And, that basically concludes today's lesson. Yes. Alright, so... Alright, I found a stream raid target. I'm gonna send you guys over to Fire the Wolf. And, yeah, 1 second. Oh, they're going through Mario Odyssey. Nice. Okay, so just gonna double check the chat again. Of course, this will be available as a VOD for later if you wish, because I know not everyone's available at this time, which is perfectly fine. Okay, I guess that should do it. So, I don't know how to do this ending thing, so I guess you're up then. Right. Thank you once again. So, thank you all very much for the stream today. I very much appreciate it. And today we will be raiding someone known as Fire the Wolf. They are currently playing through House Flipper. A very lovely game, and they're relatively funny, so yeah, I'd just recommend giving them a look. And thank you once again, Benari, for the assistance, and hope everyone had a good time with the stream today. So I will hopefully, if all things work out, I will be back tomorrow to do another live stream. I'll have to figure out what it will be, but who knows, I may do that Starbound game or something with a controller now that I have access to one again. Until then, let's begin the raid. So without any further delay, thank you all very much for coming out to today's stream. I very much appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your lovely Monday.